SaharaTV, you're welcome back to another edition of Africa Edition. We are here, as usual, to bring you certain news from certain parts of Africa and how they were reported by the local press. And we, on our part, will do a bit of, dissecting and look at the stories from our own perspective. With me to do that, as usual, on my immediate left, Rudolf Okonkwo, host of the Dr. Damage's show and a senior anchor with Sahara Reporters, among a lot of other things, I should say. And next to him, Declan, Galvin, editor, Sahara Reporters. You're welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, so today we'll be looking at 4 publications. We'll be looking at the Folha 8 from Angola, which reports a story where some women are taking to the streets in protest of some youths that were jailed, allegedly for plotting a coup against the government. We'll also be looking at a publication from Gambia called Foroya, the Foroya newspaper. There's a story in there where the manager of Taranga FM, which is a radio station, has been jailed and denied bail under some rather bizarre conditions. We will also look at another newspaper from South Sudan called The Citizen. If you've been following the show today, we had an interview with Nia Bol. Nia Bol is the editor-in-chief and the publisher of The Citizen, and he told us how he received a call from government agencies asking him to shut shop immediately. That is also featuring today on Africa Edition. And finally, we'll go to Liberia, where we have a story coming from the New Dawn. Chinese investors, a Chinese government delegation, including a team of investors, are arriving in Monrovia today to have discussions with the government there. We'll look at the details of all these stories. Let's start with the Folha 8. So, 15 young Angolan activists jailed for trying to plot a coup, and their families out there on protests. We don't hear too much coming from Angola, for instance, but a story like this makes us sit up and wonder what's going on. What's going on, Declan?
Well, I think the first thing to say is they're being accused of plotting a coup that hasn't really been proven, and it looks like evidence is suggesting that they weren't really even plotting a coup. What they were doing was they were involved with a great deal of activist work, and they were reading some kind of radical papers and anti-government ideas and theories and things like that, which carries a special weight in the history of Angola. As you know, there's a long history of Marxist and anti-Marxist views, and so that sometimes strikes a nerve. But it seems like that's really what they were doing, and so I think that's the first thing to mention. I think one of the most striking parts of this article is it really does try to discuss and put gender at the center of these protests. So the title's Women Take to the Streets, and so it's really mothers and women, it seems. And it seems like they are coming out because their husbands and sons have been jailed for a great deal of time without cause, according to them.
It's 50 days so far. It's 50 days, an awful lot of time to incite such protests in Nigeria, for instance, Rudolf?
No, my first reaction was really that President Santos, he's been there for 36 years. And if he couldn't identify a coup, when a coup, if this is the best he could do in saying this is a coup against me by these activists, then maybe he's been in control of that country very well, that nobody has actually planned a real coup. I mean, it's not even about the number of days. The interesting thing is that women are coming out. And in Africa, historically, when certain things are difficult for the men
the women are the ones who come out,
step up and push for that. It's difficult for the military to open fire on women and start killing them. So it's obvious that 2 things are happening there. One is that the citizens are I think they are suppressed for so long that they couldn't react the way you would expect. And I think the women now decided, we have to take action in this situation. The second thing is for this government that has been in power for 36 years to now be worried about some activists and circulating some things. It's amazing. It's shocking. I think Yeah, well, yeah, I think.
Let me ask you though, so how much does a government have to stomach before they actually react? Because if you have a group of people reading subversive literature, associating in certain clandestine ways and stuff like that, isn't that a red flag to any government that there's a potential coup on the horizon though?
I think we need to really point out that the only reason this is subversive is because the regime there is highly insecure, in part because he's been there for more than 3 decades. And so they've criminalized what would normally be just considered political dissent or opposition. And so the only reason we're even categorizing this as subversive, because essentially, and even one of the mothers mentioned in the article, she says, usually when you're talking about coups, troops need to arrive in the area for you to call it a coup, but here we just have, all you need is a book and a pencil. And I think that that's really what the point ought to be, is that it's gotten to such a dire situation where just regular, routine, intellectual thought is considered subversive.
Angola, Rudolf, after Santos, do you think we have a viable opposition in waiting, for instance, or is it going to be one of those?
That her Demand's daughter is preparing, is one of the richest people in the country, and that she's preparing to step in, which is what happens whether you're going to Uganda or you're going, it's the same story across Africa. If you allow them, and somehow the international community, they've allowed Santos to stay there and do whatever he likes, as long as he's pumping oil out of Angola, they're happy. And the Chinese are happy building up there, and you know, so this is the real problem, and people have been so surprised that they just cannot rise up and say this is not acceptable.
Well, I think that no amount of suppression can hold down the truth. And Angola definitely has enough young people who will replace these people who have been put away. I'm sure there will be more protests. Anyways, let's move on to The Citizen. Similar kind of story. It's not the same story, but it's kind of similar in the sense that a newspaper that's publishing material which the government doesn't like just puts in a call and says, shut down right now. Is that even acceptable? Is that even legal to start with, Declan?
I mean, so law is a very funny thing, right? So technically it is legal under their laws because they drafted laws in such a manner that would make this kind of censorship under the guise of national security or protecting national security. It's essentially been made legal, but that doesn't mean that it's right. That doesn't mean that it's correct. What the publisher and what the paper did was essentially publish an alternative view. As we know, South Sudan's in the midst of a civil war, and you've got President Kiir in the central government, and then you have the opposition with Riek Machar. And essentially, what he did was publish a perspective. I think it was an opinion piece from the opposition, and that was apparently enough to close it down. Never mind for a moment that they are in the midst of a civil war, and it seems to be split almost half and half. And so a great deal, many people would really sympathize with some of those points that were made in that opinion piece.
Rudolf, the argument has been that wars or conflicts like the Rwanda conflict started with a radio station, someone being irresponsible with the media. Do you think the government, any government in Africa, is justified to be nervous at all when a radio station like Radio Biafra is doing in Nigeria? Should Buhari be nervous?
No, I mean, the first thing is freedom of the media or the press is something that you should cherish rather than be afraid of. If the press is not free, if you gag the press, it's even worse for the country, for the society. So most African countries, most countries that are not secure, that are not doing well, are the ones who are panicking. There should be a way of holding the media accountable if they are doing something wrong.
Like what?
Like most countries is simply, for instance, if they are publishing something that is wrong, you either write a rejoinder, correct it, Okay?
Or sue them.
Or sue them, you know, and not lock them up. Not lock them up. Okay, not lock people up. Sue the newspaper and let them go and explain what they publish, and you know. But most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, it's not the fault of the paper. You find out that the stories are mainly accurate. In many cases, it's the government that they don't just want that information out. And once they just tell you national security, it covers everything, you know. In some countries in Africa, if you mention the color of the food that the president ate, it should be national security. So that's a cover for what they don't want you to see or to hear about. So I don't think it's the fault of the media. I'd rather, like Abraham Lincoln, no, not him, Jefferson said, I'd rather have a country run by newspapers than a country without the newspapers, you know.
Most definitely.
And I think there's another point to be made. So we are focusing on The Citizen because The Citizen was one of the most widely read newspapers in South Sudan. But there were 4 other media houses which were also shut down this week, right. Including radio stations and some other newspapers.
That's right.
And so this was it really goes to the sweeping powers that the National Intelligence Service in the country has to just diminish people's liberties and freedoms and freedom of expression. It's a serious problem.
Let me say this. For most governments across Africa, they will prefer that if you open a newspaper, you see just good news. They don't want to see bad news.
That's right.
And someone said that in a country where you see just good news on the paper, the good people are already in prison. They've locked up the good people. So basically, you know, so that's actually what is going on here. And the governments are not. They are afraid because they are not doing well. They are afraid that when you see these bad stories being published in the paper, that people might revolt. So they panic and then they go and close the newspaper. But then that doesn't help. It's just really not.
It doesn't at all. In this age of the internet,
people will get more agitated. And not just that. People have other sources of getting their stories out. But people will get more agitated, and the international community will pay more attention to you, which is something you don't want to see.
And you actually make the paper more popular. I had never heard about The Citizen till they tried to shut it down. And guess what? I can find information online from The Citizen. So I think it's better for African leaders to really be friendly. Be more, not friendly, because we don't really want to be friends with government. We want the government to accommodate the media because it's a vital part of governance. And guess what? Anytime a member of the press is imprisoned, the whole Inky fraternity is threatened. So it's not something we should encourage at all. That said, let's move on to the next one, which is the Foroya newspaper, the Foroya from the Gambia. Yet another situation like that. What's going on? Taranga FM manager denied bail. Another media person jailed and denied bail by a legally constituted court of law.
What you need to look at is not the stories. Look at the countries. Who are the people running these countries? the same kind of characters. No, it's true. It has to happen. That's how they remain there. That's how they've been there for as long as they've been there. So the issue is not about the media. The issue is the government, the people who are running these countries, and I'm not surprised.
I think this is a really important. So this is one of the main media events out of Gambia this week. In part because there's so little press freedom in Gambia. This was a very independent voice within Gambia. But this was also part of a longer set of drama around this individual, Abdoulaye Cissé. On July 2nd, he was actually abducted and taken by plainclothes intelligence officers from his home, and he was released 2 weeks later without charge. And it was a little after that he was faced with some legal
that was a warning. They actually warned him. This will happen. Behave well.
Go and sin no more.
Behave well. But he didn't behave well.
So this individual's had a lot of trouble this year with the government, and finally they've denied him bail, and they're not going to allow him to simply run an independent voice. He's not even hypercritical of President Jema. He's just an independent voice, and he's not obeying the orders of various security entities in the country.
Rudolf, are you going to respond?
No.
Okay, so let me read a paragraph, a very short paragraph from the piece, which I find hilarious, to say the least. Delivering his ruling, I'm quoting, delivering his ruling on the bail application following submissions by both defense and prosecution, Principal Magistrate Jallo said, although bail is available for the offense charged and having considered both arguments, the court will exercise its discretion against the accused person to allow the investigations to complete. What did he do so wrong?
No, wait. Listen, this is what he did, because we've not talked about that.
Yes.
They were distributing a picture of the president with somebody or some
pointing a gun
to his head. I mean, that's what they do in America every day. If you see what they did to Obama every day, even our own president, Jonathan, we do that every day on Jonathan. Put him in the toilets and whatever we want.
Even on Sahara reporters on SaharaTV.
So I don't understand. I mean, you feel sorry for people who live in Gambia, people who are reporters. If this will warrant your arrest, you know, that tells you. I look at it, you know, it appears to me like this is like Nigeria and under Abacha, Nigeria on this military guys. So I hope, hopefully, they will get to go beyond this point. You know.
On Sahara Reporters, we've been following this story, and we've been covering a lot more news coming out of Gambia, and a lot of the Gambian contacts and people on the ground who I've been speaking with have said that he's really one of those last voices. He's kind of like that last stronghold in terms of truly independent media, or at least mostly independent media, depending on how you frame it. And so this is a really big deal. It's really concerning that this has evolved in such a way.
And again, I'll reiterate that trying to shut down a media house is just foolhardy, to say the least. It's shooting yourself in the foot. The best that can happen is that the media is going to go underground. And when they go underground, they become more aggressive and more critical of...
No, but we have to remember, Gambia is not Nigeria or Ghana.
Right.
A lot of people don't have access to the internet. Even the print media, they don't distribute it a lot. It doesn't go far. So the government doing this, they know that if they stop that hard copy, that most people will not get to see these things.
That's a good point, Rudolf. But also, let's consider the fact that, I mean, there's a large constituency of Gambians outside of Gambia, and then also it's not an island. The African Union is watching, or supposed to be watching. ECOWAS is supposed to be watching. The United Nations, so many organizations, so many interested parties are supposed to be watching. So even though the people on the ground may not have internet or whatever, it's not as easy as that. I think they've
been watching Santos for 36 years and they're still watching.
I think there's an interesting parallel to draw between Gambia and South Sudan. Both these countries are small, or at least where most of the activity is quite small. If you go to Juba, you'll immediately find that Juba is a very small location, and so it's easier to control information because of the size of this. Same thing with Gambia. Gambia is this speck of a country, not big at all.
That's true.
Mostly around Banjul, the capital, and so if you can control these centers, which is essentially what these leaders are doing, then you're able to really hamper down information in a way. And so even underground movements are more complicated when you've got very small communities like this, because everybody knows each other.
Awesome. So let's go. I think we dragged our feet a bit, and so we're running out of time. But let's look at this story, which is my pick of the day. It's from the New Dawn from Liberia. A delegation of Chinese government and business officials are going over to that country today. As we speak, they're probably landing in the country if they haven't landed already. They have business on their minds, but there definitely are all sorts of angles to look at this. Let me pick your brains on this, Declan. What do you think the delegation is really going to do in...
So I thought this was an interesting story as well. The first one is because you have the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China arriving today in Liberia. But then for the previous week or so, you've had a substantial business delegation trying to make contacts. And so I was interested in what kind of companies were there, and I looked at them. And the majority of these companies are either mining or infrastructure or energy companies. And they mentioned in some press releases, they said that some of the companies were also food processing, and I'm sure there were some. I wasn't able to find any. But it's interesting that most of these
companies which went to Liberia were energy and extractive industries, essentially, yeah.
What does that say, though? You're driving at something, but you're not saying it.
Well, I think that it shows. I mean, this speaks a great deal to China's interests, right? So you've got these companies which are looking for minerals, as we know, minerals, whether that's coltan or any variety of precious metals, is really essential to China's development. And so a great deal of what's guiding China's relationship with Africa is these kind of extractive and mining industries. And so that's really important. It wasn't something like, it wasn't as much tech or developing kind of jobs, it seemed. It was looking for mining opportunities.
Rudolf, is China the new colonial master in Africa?
No, there was one line here where they said that China already did a lot for them in Liberia, that they built their fingerprints on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Ridiculous, what some of our politicians say.
No, their fingerprints, and also their spying equipment and other things. But, you know, the thing is this. What is sad about this is the backyard of America. And we know some of the new conflicts going on in Africa today is how to contain China in Africa. The colonial masters and the United States, they basically dropped the ball, and the Chinese are in to take over. It's difficult for the Americans to, they don't have the resources, they don't have the money, they can't invest in Africa the way China is doing. So they're basically watching, and they can't control this. For China to take this kind of, they call it a big visit, this kind of delegation to Liberia, the backyard of America, means that they are declaring that they are in Africa, and there's something you can do. It's sad. I mean, someone has to invest in Africa. Africans cannot, they don't have the resources to do that. And China seems to be the one interested. Is it good for Africa? In some areas it's good, some areas it's not. The question is what Africans are not prepared for what this will mean for them, and that's the sad thing.
Okay, we're rounding up, but let's round up with these last questions. Declan, I want you to look at this. So they call their visit a win-win visit. How so? How is it a win-win?
I think that the theory on why it would be win-win is because, at least in the immediate, it looks like Liberia's receiving things. So I know that they're essentially looking at China's building a new ministerial complex. There's a the Capital Building Annex is being built by China, and the Samuel Doe complex, which was also listed in this, is receiving major renovations. And so, on the face value, it looks like they're getting all these nice things.
Breadcrumbs.
Yeah, I would agree. But these are very. This is just the surface value. There's only surface value with this, but having controls over certain mining interests and dominating those industries, I think, is what China's getting out of it. And I would say that it's not win-win.
Okay, so Rudolf, the foreign minister in Liberia made this statement. He said, during the crisis, some individuals and countries came very close to us. Some went far from us, so we know the difference. As bad as that crisis was, it was an opportunity to know our true friends. Is he insinuating against America?
No, America actually helped. But Obama sent in soldiers, and they built hospitals, and they did a lot more than China.
So who do you think he's referring to?
I don't know, but the other countries, maybe European countries, that didn't do much. I don't think the Europeans did a lot to help Liberia, or maybe Nigeria. Maybe they were expecting more from Nigeria. Maybe, you know. But the thing is this: China is doing their protecting their interests. They're building infrastructures that will help Africa, which is true. The issue is that the relationship is not balanced. Africans end up they give a contract, like Nigeria, they say we give this contract to Chinese companies. Chinese companies will bring their own workers to come in, bring their own materials to come in. So it's not
the money ends up back in their own pockets.
Then maintaining whatever they build, you have to go back to China and have them to maintain it because you don't have, so there's so many issues with China and their investment in Africa. And we have to simply look at it as Africans. Is it beneficial to us? Are we going to be in this relationship for how long, and how are we going to change it?
African leaders really need to sit up. But before we go, final thoughts, Declan.
About Liberia.
About everything that we've discussed today.
So I think that one of the interesting themes within all these is it's a question of leadership, right? It's a question of the leadership in Liberia. Are they going to allow a win-lose kind of situation? Insecure regimes like Angola and South Sudan. I think that that's a major theme from these four pieces.
Mm. Rudolf?
Yeah, that's you got it right. And for us who are looking at this outside of Africa, they sound bizarre, weird, and you'll be like, why can they say this? But for people in Africa, it's everyday thing, everyday occurrence. They basically, I need water. I don't care who is providing it. I don't care. I need roads. I don't care who is building the roads. I don't care what they're getting back. So that's how they are saying it. So we have a lot of gap between what we know, educating the people, and the wider implication.
Mm. Whatever money you get from China, use some of it to educate the people, build schools, build roads, provide clean water and health facilities, among all the other stuff that you need to do. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Declan Galvin, editor, Sahara Reporters, and Rudolf Okonkwo, host of the Dr. Damage's show and senior anchor at Sahara TV. Thank you so much. Until next week, when we come your way again with another Africa edition. My name is Kwesi, a son Baako, signing out. And at this point, we want to bring the show to an end for this week. We hope you've enjoyed it immensely, the way we have enjoyed presenting it to you. And we hope you will also be our guest next week as we bring you another Saturday Live on Sahara TV. Until then, cheers.
Can I get your number, girl? Can I get your number, girl? Can I get your number, girl? Me, I wanna call you. Yo, what's going on, people? It's the boy Wonder J, you already know. And right now, you guys are watching Sahara TV, everything Africa. Keep it locked, don't go.
It's your boy King Cat B. Big shout out to Sahara Reporters. Everything Africa. I'm from Africa. You're from Africa. We're from Africa. Sahara TV. Let's get it.
Hi, I'm Rafia, and you're watching Sahara TV, Everything Africa.